Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we have a bunch of tournament results over the past 2 weekends. We had a bunch of Springfest events as well as Daivangasai happening over the past weekend. So just going to go through all the results, lots to cover and lots of very unique decks to take a look at as well. If you guys haven't subscribed to this channel, click that subscribe button down below for all notifications on this channel. So just starting with Springfest Vancouver, I think this is probably the most tame I wouldn't say tame, more expected results, and that's probably across the board. So first team taking Prism, Luard, Shunui, probably the sweatiest lineup you can bring. Second place brought Greedon instead of Luard, so Greedon, Prism, and Shunui. Third brought Prism, Luard, and Greedon, so no Shunui in that lineup. And fourth bringing Prism, Shunui, and Luard. So pretty much only 4 different type of decks within the top 4, which is pretty crazy, right? And to be honest, this is what we expect. But yeah, Greedon pick seems to be, you know, a little bit spicy. So I'm gonna take a look at one of them. So I think this is the second place list. So the second place list plays this this triple R and being able to essentially top 5 and core 1, which is, you know, good because then you can dig for stuff like, you know, this ball looking thing, and then pretty much just fill up your board and then clean it all up, right? Otherwise, everything else just kind of stays the same as every other Greedon list. Nothing too crazy, 2-2 heal splits. Yeah, very straightforward. Then jumping to tri-regulation, so we had more or less the same. Let's just say Shunui is the best deck for a lot of formats, right? So not just standard, because literally in standard every single team brought Shunui, which is absolutely ridiculous. And then in V we had Gurgut, Anj, Gurgut, Tharvis, and then in premium we had Shunui come first, so obviously, you know, really good deck in all formats. Katrina coming second, Highlander coming third, and Night Rose coming fourth. So the third place team is Stephen Lee's team. Congrats to Stephen and Tyler coming third place. Just looking at Steven's Highlander deck, very shiny. One thing that I noticed was that you obviously run the grade 1 Denial Griffin package, but not running the grade 2. And I can see that because, you know, you don't necessarily have to always see the Denial Griffin play early. You can try to kind of dig for it, and you don't really want to commit 2 slots for it, and you'll be able to find this, you know, pretty easily, especially if you're spamming, like, you know, your Betties, drawing through your deck, Emilia spam, Finessa. Like you have a lot of ways to be able to find it. And then, you know, let's just say, you know, you call out Laura, you just drop a board, you just pick it all up again, and then you have access to the Denial Griffin play anyways. So yeah, other than that, pretty much very Highlander-ish deck, red OT, basic Angel Ladder, but nothing else really differs. So very cool list. Yeah, I think that was one of the big pickups, I think. Committing only 1 slot to the Denial Griffin versus 2, because I know a lot of decks decide to commit 2 for Highlander anyways. Then jumping to WGP Deluxe Season 1 in Malaysia. So the top 8 consisted of 2 Welstra, 2 Varga. I think these 2 decks are very strong at the moment for the set 2 meta. And then one of them, Mygo, Eva, Prison, and Luard. So very cool to see Prison there. Then we had Welstra coming first, Mygo coming second, Welstra coming third, and Varga coming fourth. So this is actually a very good indication for the Western side, because obviously we don't have the set 2 stuff yet, and, you know, Mygo going into the set 2 meta, it's actually very good. So, you know, very cheap, affordable deck to be able to pick up. If you're jumping into the competitive scene, very straightforward deck, nothing too crazy. We might as well take a look at the list anyways. So this is the list here. The only thing we don't have is this Youthquake Regalis piece, and it's actually a pretty good talking point, because previously this slot would be the grade 2 Krychich, grade 2, or yeah, Krychik or whatever it's called. But instead you're substituting the grade 2 for it. Essentially, it's a 15k Blitz order, or 25k if you bind the same copy of your Vanguard for the cost of Counterblast 1 or Energy Blast 3. And then if this card is ditched for the right day, you can Counterblast 1 or Energy Blast 2 and draw a card and remove it. So I guess it's like it gives a way for this deck to have slightly more defense instead of worrying about the soul. But I guess, you know, you still have access to two. Two's enough. One extra soul per game is like very good anyways. But other than that, like, I guess substituting this is not bad either, just defensive options. And I mean, Mygo doesn't really use any other like Regardless piece, maybe other than like Evergreen or like the Chalice. I think Evergreen uses up your soul and you kind of don't want to do that. And the Chalice is like an extra persona rub, but the deck really doesn't need it. Yeah, it's just a little bit more. So I think this is actually a pretty good inclusion. You don't use too much CB anyways. But the Energy Blast, right? You don't actually use energy in this deck at all. So, you know, Energy Blast 3 is a formidable cost to be able to, you know, have access to 25k shield, essentially. So yeah, very cool list. Then jumping to WGP Deluxe Season 1 in Taiwan. So here it's a little bit different. The landscape is 2 Razel and then 1 of Luard, Eva, Blankmeyer, Varga, Zorga, and training tools. I think like Taiwan seems to really like training tools. I think this was evident in the previous season as well. Then the top 4, first was Razel, second was Luard, third was Eva, and fourth is Blankmeyer. Eva a returning deck, and we'll take a look at that deck in just a sec. So jumping to the big event that happened over the weekend. So we had Daivangasai. Daivangasai had 2 tournaments. So one is standard teams, which is a 3v3, and then tri-regulation, which is also teams 3v3. So pretty much equivalent to a Springfest, which is pretty cool. So looking at the top 16 deck distribution, majority brought Varga, Razel, and Shiranui, along with Zorga and Drajud, and then pretty much all the other slots cover kind of everything else. Do bear in mind that diversity cut is a thing. So, you know, if you're playing obscure stuff, then you have a better chance of getting in, especially at the X1 cut. Then I guess we'll look at the A block standings. So the first place team brought a Varga, Chaos, and Shiranui. Very, I guess the two decks that make sense is like the two sides, right? Chaos is a little bit like, you know, whatever. It's a strong deck. Like, don't get me wrong, but I think there's just like other picks that you can pick. But then again, you know, diversity cut might have just gotten this team in, and then this team just literally made a run, which is pretty cool. Second place is Luard, Varga, and the Prison in the middle. You know, I think these 3 decks you can safely say are like good picks. Same with the third place team here, bringing in Leonorn, Shiranui, and Eva, and then Team China coming fourth with Razel, Leonorn, and Zorga. So actually going to take a look at the prison list. So one thing that struck out was, I guess, the use of the new Elementaria Sanctitude. Pretty cool art, not gonna lie, with the 4 elements. Pretty cool. And I guess, you know, having like access to a Blitz Order PG is really good, especially if you're trying to dodge, you know, guard restricts. Otherwise, pretty much everything stays the same except for like the Taser Lage. Taser Lage is like pretty interesting. I don't know, like, I guess if you're playing against Razel, then it makes sense. You just kind of put this in the front row. Anything that your opponent calls, you just rest it. Same with Zorga, I guess. You just rest their roaming prison dragons. Like, they can't get rid of this card, right? So I guess that makes sense. And yeah, playing Bracing Angel Ladder and not Forbidol for the Regardless piece. Interesting pick, I guess. Maybe, you know, you're going into a Sea of Shiranui, you kind of want this. And I mean, you have like 4 security upgrader and like 3 copies of Pure Light anyways, so you're bound to find it, right? But otherwise, everything else is kind of good. Mainstay, 2 of the grade 2 for early PGing, which is good. But yeah, very cool list. I actually wanted to talk about a team that did not make the top 4, and that was Different Fights team. So that consisted of Zorga, Kyouka, and Eva. So big shout out to them. Very cool to see that, you know, our biggest content creator got top 8 at probably the biggest Vanguard event, probably to date, maybe. With a very odd lineup, if I gotta say. So I think they went 7-0 personal for Chris, X maybe, or X1. I don't remember, but I remember seeing they were like top of like the X1s on the cutoff sheet, which was pretty cool. So I actually wanted to talk about their team composition. So one of the players played Zorga. So the one inclusion of the I guess the Dual Nation card allows you to essentially get any copy of orders from the bin and add it to hand, or alternatively you can call something else out from the bin to rearguard. Also playing like the Lascaria Blitz order, I guess being able to fish that for defense is really good too. And then, you know, pretty much playing the base of any other Zorga engine, Habitat to be able to dig. And I think like going forward, like the fact that you chip out one space for this may mean that, you know, you don't actually need to pressure too much with the crit in the mid game. I think you can kind of control the pace of the game and kind of sit them on, you know, 3 or 4 damage and then pretty much kill them that way, because essentially everything becomes threats anyways, because, you know, if you attack with your Vanguard, potential of crits might happen, and this deck actually filters a lot. So it's very interesting to play like a bunch of like different situational orders, like what you're playing, obviously the Elementary Sanctitude and the 2 different Blitz orders, being able to find off Shadow Cloak for any situation, and then you play obviously 4 Habitat. 4 Habitat can actually net you into any of your other orders as well, and then obviously Shadow Cloak, and then the I think this is the on hit sack itself to grab an order. So being able to just fish for any order at any time is just really, really powerful. And I think being able to control the game and the pace of the game and having that in your hands is actually very, very strong. So yeah, I think this is a pretty cool way to play Zorga. But yeah, and I mean, like, Zorga Nadia is, you know, very, very cool. That's all I gotta say. That's all I gotta say. The art looks sick, right? So yeah, I think Zorga, in a world where Zorga players are very refined, I think this deck is very, very powerful. Obviously time rules, but if you're playing at like ultra rapid speed, you know the lines of this deck into pretty much all your matchups, like you'll be a-okay. So yeah, lots of very weird inclusions, and I think, you know, going forward there's going to be a lot of creativity with the orders that you run, especially if like your meta is like, you know, super slow, then you might not see some of these orders included, and then other orders I guess put in the deck as well. So that was the Zorga player, and then obviously Chris playing Eva. One thing I don't like about this deck is that it's not high rarity. It's like not max rarity, right? Like, what is this? Come on, man. What is this? Like, bro, get your 3 FFRs, right? No, I'm kidding. I think this deck is very stable. Like, Eva in its history has been like one of these decks that just kind of paces the game. It's not explosive, but, you know, sometimes if you go first and, you know, you just like drop double Obscurate and your opponent's hand sucks, you just sometimes win. But I think, you know, it's a very stable deck. And also playing the Blitz order, I think this is a really well positioned inclusion for Eva. Just being able to essentially ramp up stuff, and it's just really, really nice, right? But otherwise, like, the deck is so stable. You know, you're still playing like your combine rushes, being able to get stuff for free, and essentially Poison Eva is free, right? You're not using CB for anything really, and being able to have an engine to essentially find pieces, compressing your deck is just insanely strong. Red OT putting on more pressure, and especially if you're standing with a crit Obscurate, yeah, it's pretty gross. So yeah, very, very cool list. Big shout out to Different Fight. Very cool to see that he got top 8, and, you know, that's very gaming. I actually wanted to talk about this list. So Kyouka being a list, well, a deck in itself has never actually seen, I guess, like the spotlight, right? Let's just put it that way. But I kind of looked through this deck and kind of tried to understand how the hell this deck works, and it's because of this broken grade 3 PR, right? So essentially it says you can counterblast 1 if you have a Kyouka Vanguard, and you essentially call 2 units with different grades to rearguard, and you essentially can play double orders, right? Magazines, you know, yada yada, you gain plus 10, can charge 1, I think it's like draw a card or something. But actually, the best bit about this is actually this. This grade 2 is insane because essentially, right, you bounce the stuff that you call out with the grade 3 order. And because the grade 3 order can search for PGs, you have unlimited amounts of PGs. Like, that is ridiculous, right? So I guess, you know, we're going into a meta where things are a little bit more paced. And I think, you know, you can see that from like the Zorga list. Eva is a paced deck as well. And, you know, Kyouka, the way that this deck was constructed, you know, you still have your offense in your blue grade 2, you know, still canvas 1, soul loss 1 restander. And you can start pushing for stuff. But being able to fish out for anything that you want in the bin at any point and then just bounce it with this grade 2 is ridiculously strong. So yeah, you know, let's just say you ditch your OT or whatever, you bring the OT back as like 50k shield, right? Just like that. Just like guard or rear guard, call it a day. The 1 card guard, and this deck actually becomes super duper tanky, right? So yeah, like that's just a really cool way to play Kyouka. And I think, you know, if you're a Kyouka fan, this is definitely a list to pick up and just kind of, you know, experiment. And I think this is also like one of those decks where you could start to include like a bunch of one-offs or, you know, a bunch of tech cards because you're able to essentially fish it out with the Kyouka engine, right? So yeah, very cool list. So big shout out again to Different Fights team and Harapin-san. Very, very cool to see, you know, probably 3 really odd picks to me because, you know, if I was building a team for Daivangasai, probably have like Varga, maybe Mygo for diversity cut, and I don't know, something else like Blank Maya or something. So yeah, very cool list. Then jumping to block B, Daivangasai had 2 blocks because it's that big. So 7 Zorgas, 6 Razel, 6 Varga are the predominant 3 decks in this block, along with Blank Mai and Shiranui, and then a bunch of like, you know, other odd picks as well. Eva being, you know, 4 of, and then everything else is like 2 ofs and 1 ofs. Then the first place team brought Zorga Nadir, Blank Maya, and Welstra. 3 probably the strongest decks in the format at the moment. Second place team brought Razel, Varga, and Drajud. Third brought Razel, Prison, and Zorga Nadir. And then fourth was Mygo, Shiranui, and Varga. Looking at the Drajud list, this is pretty standardized. And again, inclusion of the new Elementaria Sanctitude really strong, especially if, you know, you can't really do much against a guard restrict, but now you can as a grade 4 deck. So welcomed inclusion, but otherwise you're essentially trading off the Draco Kid for this new broken grade 1, and then essentially your flex slots, so to say, so like your Servant Falcratia for the new cycle card. I think this grade 1 is ridiculously OP in this deck, just being able to top 3 search, 1 to soul, 1 to bin, 1 to bottom, or something along those lines, or 1 to hand, something. I think it was like 1 to hand, 1 to soul, 1 to bottom deck, or discard or something. Makes this deck extremely strong. Being able to find this to draw your card because you don't use energy for anything else, it is very, very good. Drajud's one big problem was hand size, but with the cycler card, it is no longer the case. So yeah, very cool. Then we also had tri-regulation, so the top 4 teams. So the first team brought Eva Chronofang for V and Shiranui. Okay, so the Shiranui makes sense, Eva makes sense, but Chronofang, wow. Haven't heard of that in like years. Second place was Zorga Nadir, Gurgit, and Night Rose. You know, pretty good. Third place team was Zorga Nadir, Gurgwit, and Highlander. And then 4th place was Juju, Tabas, and NLK. Haven't heard NLK in a while, and I think like Japan really likes NLK. So here's the list, pretty standardized, 4-2-2 split of 3s, pretty much 4-rolls of nearly everything else, other than I guess like the one odd pick of Edge and Darkness for the Grade 3 Searcher. Playing Bracing Angel Ladder. Bracing Angel Ladder in this deck is actually ridiculous. It means that all of your rear guards can't be Denial Griffin or retired. Actually bonkers. That means that you will always get your NLK off no matter what, which is ridiculously strong. You're also playing one of this Grade 3 order. Being able to essentially Soul Charge 1 and tutor from your soul is very strong. This essentially becomes an extra copy of every card in your deck, which is really strong, right? Being able to get out your Fuginin, your Covetous Succubus, especially like a 3rd Hope on Damp. You know, this card is in your hand, can't go with it. Well, guess what? You just use it, Soul Charge 1, call out your Hope on Damp, and your opponent just immediately dies. So yeah, otherwise, nothing too crazy in the G zone. Yeah, very cool list. Then the last event we had was Springfest Bulgaria. So the 1st place team for Standard brought Messiah, Minerva, and Shunui. Second was Prism, Shunui, and Youthberg. 3rd is a sweaty lineup, Shunui, Luard, and Prison. And 4th was Bastion Accord, Prison, and Omina Gruzio. Wow, that's a lineup. That's a lineup. Very cool. And then looking at tri-regulation, so the 1st team brought Night Rose for V, Prism for D, and Night Rose for Premium. 2nd place, this was actually Dave Vex's team. First, the V player brought Gurgwit, Shunui for Standard, and a Siana Tirua. This list was pretty fire, not gonna lie. It's actually really annoying because if you're playing a premium deck, your rear guards are like very precious and you have to kind of discard one to kind of keep it on the board. And sometimes it's really awkward, right? Because Siana just essentially puts a trigger into Soul, it gains +15. And I think it's like, if your opponent has, or if you have like 1 or less Guardians or something like that, you essentially have to discard or your rear guard is bound, right? Very strong into, I guess, Night Rose, maybe. But Night Rose, you know, you just dump your hand anyways and you just die. But a lot of decks like Katrina, Shunui, can't keep your restanders and your hand is low anyways. So this deck just absolutely wrecks you, you know, on the return, which is, yeah, very cool. 3rd place team was Alex Kwan's team. So Jasmine brought Anj, Alex brought Orphis. Big respect for this. I think it's your favorite deck, right? Very cool to see. And then Victor brought Katrina. And then 4th place was a Gurgwit, Thegria, and Shunui. So that's pretty much all the results that we have for this week. A lot to cover. So yeah, I think there's been some interesting stuff, especially on the JP side, and I guess the evolution of Standard. A lot of players are kind of shifting away from, you know, Vargas or Blankmines and actually playing like Zorganadir. We're seeing more of that now. That Kyouka list is actually very good. So a lot of like, you know, innovation on the Japanese side. So curious to see what, you know, the Western side can cook up as well. If you guys like this video, pop a like, comment down below what you guys think of all the tournament results that we covered in this video. If you guys haven't already, click that subscribe button, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.